The first thing you're going to want to do is remove the key from the ignition. To turn the snowblower on its side, actually what I always do before I do any repairs on it is I make sure that there is not enough gas in the tank, so when you turn it sideways it does not backflow onto the cap so it could spill out. Then take a 3/8 inch socket. I use an extension on my wrench because it just makes it easier to get to some of the nuts and bolts so it doesn't collide with any of the, you see the cover that's there by the belt and stuff. So there's the Craftsman wrench I chose to use. You're going to want to remove the cover off the side that exposes the belt and the pulley that moves the auger. Take the bottom bolt off first, because if you take the other ones above it off first, the cover will kind of wiggle around and make it a little bit more difficult to get that off. So go ahead and take all those off and pull off the cover. And from there you'll be able to remove the belt. Now what I like to do is I have to take the cover that I just took off and put all of my parts that I'm using for this project into that cover. Just makes it easier to get everything. Just pay attention to your bolt sizes, because some of them are longer than others. The bolt on the bottom is shorter than the other ones that run along the top. Go ahead and remove the pulley. You'll want to take off the smaller portion first. I found easier. Then you can push the lever and it exposes that little clamp that holds the belt onto the larger flywheel. Now you want to have something to put up into the assembly. I used a 2x4 to stop it from moving on you, so you can take apart all the moving parts. Take a 1-inch socket to use to get the wheel off of the larger size. I was going to use my wireless or cordless impact wrench, however its battery was dead, so I had to use my torque wrench instead. Now you're going to go clockwise to get it off. It's counterproductive to what you normally would think, lefty loosey, righty tighty. In this instance you're going to go right. So go right to get the wheel off, and then to get it back on you're going to go left. So it's kind of opposite of what you would normally think. If you start going left, it will obviously not work, and you'll just be tightening everything. Alright, so once you get that all off, now you can turn it around to the other side, still putting the 2x4 or whatever it is you throw up into the assembly to stop it from moving. So we can go ahead and take the other moving part off the opposite side. This one is the same 3/8 inch socket I'm using for pretty much everything else. It's only the 1-inch wrench or 1-inch socket for the other things. So you'll want to go ahead and take that off of there. Come out pretty easy. There is a lock washer on there and a washer on the other side of the lock washer that kind of holds everything into place and keeps everything kosher. So once you get that off of there, we'll go ahead and move on to the next step. Now at this point you are going to want to remove the 3 remaining bolts that are on there. Unfortunately, I don't know why I didn't get video of this, but take those last 3 off on that side and then put them in that pan for later. Right, now swing the snowblower back around and you'll take the other 3 that are on the opposite side off, holding that cover plate on there that holds the bearing assembly in there. Now in most cases yours will probably come off just like mine did on the opposite side. The other bearing came right out with the spacer, everything was fine, but this one did not. So this was where mine posed a pretty big problem of getting it out of there. As you can see right here, trying to even get the assembly out is impossible. There's a little metal clamp that goes around the outer ring of that bearing on there, and even taking that off did not free up the assembly per se to come out of there very cleanly. Everything was still pretty tight. So I ended up having to go through a very intense process to kind of get mine out of there. I'll kind of explain that to you guys later, but if yours comes off cleanly, everything will come out and everything will be fine and you'll have no issues. If yours was like mine, however, you're going to have to find a creative way to get it off of there. So I left that the shaft kind of out and exposed. I ended up having to saw off as close to that spacer bearing as I can. As you'll see right here, I've cut everything off of there, but I cut as close to the spacer as I could. There's like a little welding rivet area that I got real close to, and I got everything cut off of there. So the bearing, I'll show you here in a second how I got that off of there, because at first I just needed to expose that so I could have a chance to get that bearing off of the shaft. So there you see I just kind of cut. It took a while, it took about 20 minutes to get everything cut off of there. It was not a very fun process, but I did get it out of there. And then from there, I was left with that remaining portion of the shaft that had the spacer and the bearing on it. So what I did is I took an 1.25" impact socket and used that to put the remaining portion of the shaft down in there. So the spacer part and the rest of that shaft kind of went down into the socket. And then, so you see me put kind of just demonstrating where the spacer was on there, then the bearing, I can't get it back on there because it's still so tight, but you'll see it kind of slides down in there. And then from there, I grabbed a hammer and I knocked the heck out of it until it freed. It took me about 5 or 6 really good hits on it. It is better if you have a vise, since you would be able to put everything into that and kind of bang on it from there instead of having to put it on the ground. So from here you'll be able to take the assembly out of the snowblower, and if your bearings came out automatically, you probably had a much easier time than I did. You'll take the new one and put one longer side in first, and then you can take the other side and put it in. Make sure you put your spacers back on the shafts on both sides before you put everything in, and everything will go just fine. I did take 220 grit sandpaper to kind of sand those edges down because I was noticing that the bearings going on there were a little tight, so I wanted to be able to kind of grease them up a little bit before I put them on there. So I wanted to sand it down, get everything nice and ready to go for the bearing, so I hopefully won't have this issue the next time. So from here, you're going to take one of the covers you had taken from earlier and grab a couple of, or 3 of those screws, the hex screws that you had, and make sure you take the shorter ones, not the shortest one that goes on the bottom of that belt cover, but the ones that are just above that. There should be 6 of them. So you'll put those 3 on that side, get them all tightened up. So from here, you're going to turn the snowblower around so you can go ahead and start working on the other side. Now, if you notice, this bearing I'm putting on right now did not go on quite as easily as the other side. It was still sanded down and did go on a little bit easier than when I just tried putting it on before. But everything will kind of get into place once we tighten everything up. So the bearing that I had taken off, I had taken the outer ring off of there because I didn't want to bang it up and mess it up being able to use it again. So I used a pair of needle nose pliers to put it on. It was easier to do it in my hand than actually on the shaft. So here, once I got that all taken care of, I'm going to go ahead and put the cover plate back on with those 3 screws again. Make sure it's not the longest of the screws you have remaining. It should be 3 medium size hex screws than what you have in that plate if you are putting them in the cover. So there's how everything should look once you get everything put in place. Now let's go ahead and put that 2x4 back into the assembly to tighten everything up so it doesn't move on us. Get it nice and snug. Now keep an eye on it when you are tightening everything up. The 2x4 will kind of move on you, so you're going to want to make sure to kind of push it back up in there as it starts sliding. You can see it sliding around on me. And remember, you're going counterclockwise now, not clockwise, because you took it off clockwise. You're going left now to tighten it up. So go to the other side and put that hex screw that has the lock washer and washer on it on the other side of the auger assembly, keeping the 2x4 in there. Go ahead and tighten it up, and it'll lock on there with the lock washer. From here, you're going to want to go ahead and put that belt back on. I go ahead and start with the smaller side, put it on there, and then make sure to put you'll push the lever to get it up underneath that little clip, and I put it on the bottom part of the bigger wheel last. Everything seemed to go on a little bit quicker that way. Less resistance. Now you'll take your cover, make sure you get it up underneath that belt on the bottom side because it is a little bit loose. Now I go ahead and put everything back on with the top bolts first, the longer ones. You should only have 1 small bolt remaining. So I got those all kind of hand tightened on there first. Once you get everything all tightened up, go ahead and take that 2x4 out of there, or whatever you're using. Turn it right side up and go ahead and throw the key back in the ignition because it should be ready for use again. You'll probably want to put more gas in it if you did have to take any out.